Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Cosby, and I'm a professor in the Department of Politics and International Affairs. And we are convening this session around the topic of race and policing in America today. I'd like to open up a little bit about by referencing James Baldwin, and James Baldwin penned an essay in 1966 about policing, and he called African American communities occupied territories. And I think what we're trying to move towards today is a discussion about how we can unravel that and create communities across the nation that are a part of the body of America and not outside of the body of America. Um, Baldwin's essays are collected in a volume called Jeremiah. And a Jeremiah is a long lamentation or a long complaint. And so, what we're witnessing today is not just a discussion about the killings of George Floyd, it is a discussion about the killings of Emmett Till, Fred Hampton, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, John Crawford, Tanisha Anderson, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. So that long list is what leads us to this global repulsion to police killings that are that are the equivalent to murder. So, with that, we're going to turn to our speakers for today. Our first speaker is Courtney Patterson. So, Courtney's going to introduce herself, her major, and any offices that she holds on Furman's campus.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Patterson. I am a current senior in politics and international affairs major. I am the president of the Student League for Black Culture this school year, as well as secretary for NAACP. So I just want to start off with my personal statement, which will be reflecting on Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery specifically. Okay, so on July 13th, 2013, the nation was changed. When George Zimmerman was found not guilty during the Trayvon Martin trial, it seemed as though Black America came to a complete halt. I remember this day vividly. I was 14, and my mother and I were driving down the highway listening to the verdict on the radio. Each caller had a heartbreaking tone, one more strong than the next. We rode in silence for some time, and tears were rushing down my face. It was the first time I understood that Black people could be harmed simply for their skin color, that the justice system does not save everyone, that I or my loved ones could be harassed and taken away at any moment. My mother told me not to cry and to continue to move forward, and at the time I didn't understand why she wouldn't let me grieve. But looking back, there are a million and one things I wish I could go back and tell myself. I recognize now that my mother took this moment to prepare me for what would be a reality for the rest of my life. Police brutality against Black bodies is nothing new. It's in the fabric of our nation. There's historic and discontinued trust of police in the Black community. My grandmother saw this during Jim Crow in North Carolina. My mother told me about it in the riots in Los Angeles in 1992. And now this new generation has been awakened with Trayvon. As I've continued to grow and understand the complex dynamics of race relations in America, it seems that the list goes on and on and on. We've recently heard about the heartbreaking murder of Ahmaud Arbery, a young man from Georgia who was wrongfully accused of several break-ins in a Georgia neighborhood. While this occurred this past February, the video has just circulated the media in the last few weeks and horrified the hearts of American viewers. But this nation was built on the blood of Black bodies. The soil that has swallowed these bodies whole has bloomed to what we call a free land. But the price of terror and genocide is far too high. I wish there was something comforting that I could say to that 14-year-old version of myself, asking her mother what she should do if she runs into trouble with the police. But Black children have to grow up much faster than everyone else. We don't have the luxury of ignorance forever. There's a saying in the Black community, you better come home before the streetlights on. And I think of it now more than ever. Every kiss, every hug, every moment is precious because you don't know what lies beyond your door. I want to truly believe that good will conquer evil, that love will quell hate, that compassion can overrule fear and misunderstanding. In a time such as this, when the world is quite literally falling apart, I pray that we can find comfort in one another, and each of us invoke our civic duty, that we exercise our right to vote, ask tough questions, and challenge bigotry and hatred. I'm confident that we can have a better tomorrow. We just have to be brave enough to try.
Thank you, Courtney. Tatiana, I think you're up next.
Hi everyone, my name is Tatiana Watts. I'm a current senior here at Furman. I'm a communications studies major with a minor in African diaspora culture. I am the vice president of Furman's chapter of NAACP along with treasurer of the Student League for Black Culture, and I also work within Furman Athletics in the sports marketing department. And I will be speaking about how Black women and the Black LGBT community are affected like throughout the movement, and how we often seem to prioritize cis heterosexual Black men within the movement. It took me a long time to like break down the bullet points of what I wanted to say. I really don't have anything structured because as many times as I tried to write, I either erased what I said or it brought myself to tears because I couldn't understand why this was happening. I had a conversation with my mother last week, and like while the protests were beginning to get started, and we were talking about how people tend to and did ignore Breonna Taylor's murder because it was covered by George Floyd's. And we talked about how Black women and Black LGBTQ community members are often ignored when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, which I found to be kind of disgraceful because the Black Lives Matter movement was created by 3 queer Black women. One name, and in that conversation, I had found out about Tony McDade, a trans Black man who was killed not even 24 hours after George Floyd by the Tallahassee police in Florida. And it really just stunned me to realize that we often drown these names out to push forward and in this sort of prioritization of what will make the movement look better and what names and what people will make the movement look better, when all Black lives matter, no matter what and who you are. And this also falls into something I'm going to shout Dr. Cosby out. We talked about in her Black political traditions class, intersectionality. It plays a big role in America and everywhere, to be honest, because I'm a Black woman. 2 different minorities all wrapped in one. And it's kind of hard to look at the news and look on my Twitter and look on my Instagram, because that could be me, and that is very frightening. And to see how people have really put a blind eye towards it to uplift other Black bodies, and it's just, I don't know, it was kind of heartbreaking to see that, because there are so many people within the Black community who do tend to ignore Black women and who do tend to ignore the LGBT aspect of our community when we all are Black. And we can't separate these identities because they're all one. So I'm going to stop talking here because I'm about to cry.
Thank you, Tatiana. Q, I think you're up next.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Patterson. I am a politics and international affairs and philosophy double major with a minor in African diaspora cultures, and I am the NAACP president and a member of the Raleigh Institute Advance team. So I really just want to, give a rallying call to all those people out there who feel like they're lost, who feel like there's no one who cares or there's not anyone out there, because I just want you to know there are other people out there. There are other people fighting. And this is just a statement that I prepared to just express how I was feeling and just bring to light some of these instances that we do not often speak of. So the death of George Floyd was just another link in the long chain of police brutality in America. We cannot discuss George Floyd without speaking about Rodney King, and an unarmed Black man who was pulled over and brutally beaten in the streets in 1991. The release of the video footage by civilians sent shockwaves of racial discourse throughout America. It is estimated the officers struck him with batons between 53 and 56 times. He spoke to reporters from his wheelchair, with his injuries evident, a broken right leg in a cast, his face badly cut and swollen, bruises on his body, and a burn area to his chest where he had been jolted with a 50,000-volt stun gun. He described how he had knelt, spread his hands out, and tried to move slow, so as not to make any stupid move, but ultimately got hit across the face with a club and shot. He said he was scared for his life as they drew down on him. Of the 4 officers charged, 3 were acquitted, and the jury failed to reach a verdict on the 4th charge. The anger spurred from the unjust trial resulted in the 1992 LA riots, which resulted in the federal prosecution of the officers and the later conviction of the 2. Our Constitution maintains that we are innocent until proven guilty. In trial, it is the burden of the state to prove otherwise. When did police become our judge, jury, and executioner? We cannot sit idly by while our brothers and sisters become martyrs in the streets. We cannot be silent when we see the injustices committed against our fellow man. It is the duty of all people, despite race, nationality, gender, or sexual orientation, to stand up for what is right. Those of you who stand beside us, I commend your bravery. This work is not easy, and it is far from over. When we look at the death of George Floyd, we see many of the same facts remain. This was an unarmed Black man. The only crime he stood accused of was giving a deli a counterfeit $20 bill, the penalty for which in Minnesota is no more than 1 year of imprisonment, payment of a fine of no more than $3,000, or both. Yet this man was slammed face down into the street even after he surrendered to arrest and had to endure the pressure of 4 officers' knees stabbing into his legs, back, and neck. His last words were, "I can't breathe, mama, and please." My question to those officers who stand against us is, how can you protect and serve us when you do not want to touch us? How can you protect and serve us when your first reaction is to fear us? How can you protect and serve us when you are killing us in the streets? Thank you.
I'm mute button was on. Thank you, Q. So Griffin, all the others have talked. Is there anything that you would like to reflect on? And not putting you on the spot. If not, then, then that's okay. But I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I've been doing a lot of reflection, obviously, since I am a white man. And this morning I started reading White Fragility. And I think I want to make sure that I am listening and reflecting on myself. And it kind of talked about it, which I never thought about in the first chapter of the book, about how like the problem isn't just like extreme, like the racism that's blatant, but like the first chapter, it said like the progressive people who say, "Oh, I'm not racist," and they disassociate themselves from the conversation. And I want to make sure that I loop myself back in the conversation and really just reflect on my actions and my thoughts and everything. But that's really it for right now.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of start out with Courtney's theme, because Courtney's linkage is more about vigilanteism, because the examples of Ahmaud Arbery and Trayvon Martin weren't necessarily police who engaged in the hunting and shooting and killing of them. It was people who put themselves in a position of using or occupying a police position against these 2 young men. So I'd like for someone to reflect on how that makes you feel, and what are some of the solutions to this type of problem when citizens arm themselves to enforce the law. And that can be anyone.
I'll try.
Okay.
I guess when I think about Ahmaud or Trayvon, and most recently with George, I've been asking myself who looks like a criminal and who needs to be put on surveillance. And I think it's one thing to, obtain your civic duty and you're looking out for your neighborhood or your city, but to what extent? And I do think white people need to ask themselves about questions of implicit bias or maybe address fears that they might have or things that they don't understand about people of color, and have those tough conversations and ask those questions. I think that's the beginning of how to solve it, but there's no easy answer. It's hard to say what makes you look like a criminal and what doesn't, or someone who would start trouble.
So Tatiana's reflection was on kind of the missing discussion about violence against the bodies of African Americans, and it's the missing discussion about women and how long Breonna Taylor's story had been out there before there was any resonance around her story. And then the LGBTQ community. And it is really ironic with Black Lives Matter because you have Alicia Garza and the others who start the organization and they're queer. And so I'm interested in that kind of reflection about why we think that happens, that the dialogue is always about men, and that's what gets the protest started, and that's what gets the anger up across America, but never about kind of Black women. Sandra Bland, it was reported, but you didn't get this angst about Sandra Bland. So anybody want to comment on why we think that happens? And you can take your time, and it doesn't have to be the one who reflected on that part of it. And I'm going to push you a little bit more. Does it reflect perhaps society's value statement about men versus women? Or is it simply another stereotype and a categorization where people are led to believe that this most often happens to Black men? And hence, that's where the problem is.
I think it's more of the second aspect, what you just said, just the categorization. And when we think about things like this, we talk about mass incarceration and we talk about Black men, their incarceration rates, but we don't talk about the Black female incarceration rate or the Latino female incarceration rates. So I think it's just, we tend to shift to the dominant within those groups that we find, so Black men would be the dominant, and so you see Black women as the subordinate. You wouldn't think of that first. That's not the dominant in that group. So I think people just naturally gravitate to that dominant, when you think white, you don't think white woman, you think white man. That's the first thing that you automatically have that pops some spurs in your head when you think of racism. So it's just, I think, just society, like you said, and those societal issues and how we frame things, how the media frames things really comes into perspective, with just how the media talks about Black men all the time. This is about Black men, incarceration, thugs, criminals, these things. So it's just, I think, the whole culmination of all of these different things just rolling together that makes it, doesn't really give Black women the voice that they need.
And so transitioning to kind of your theme, Q, which is the direct police violence against the bodies of Black men. And it reminds me of a particular part of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, where she asked her readers to engage in a thought experiment. And the thought experiment was close your eyes and imagine a criminal. And when you close your eyes and imagine a criminal, who do you see? And her conclusion was you would see the Black man, and she actually labeled it the stereotype of the criminal Black man. So how do you think this kind of viewpoint impacts how police officers approach Black men who they suspect is engaging in criminal activity? And that's anyone, not just Q. Is this kind of the big problem, this categorization of the Black man as a criminal?
I think that may be one of the big issues just in society in general. how we do things, how we shape things, how we determine who's valuable and who's not valuable, and just the society that we're living in. You have to figure out which group receives priority. And whenever one group receives more priority than others, then you obviously have a scale. There's different variations in who's going to receive the most priority, and we start and we get into this, and Black people just happen to be at the bottom of who receives priority in this country when it comes to politics, when it comes to our healthcare, when it comes to just our treatment in the streets, when it comes to just people advocating. You have to think about where Black people are in the whole spectrum of everything that is America. It's more than just about this one instance or just this one type of issue. Like I said, we have healthcare, we have issues with Black women, all of these Black women missing in America, and no one speaks out about this. Just all of these different things that we as a society don't deem are important. And so whenever we have these unimportant people and these officers with a racial history in America, with the command and control aspect of policing, regulation, control officers, they seem to know that they can get away with doing things to Black bodies that they wouldn't be able to do to other bodies. And I think that's a problem. It's because we don't prioritize those Black bodies.
Okay. So I want to shift a little bit and then just ask each of you how you're doing. Because this is an emotional time. It's been very emotional for me.
I think the word I've been using is exhausting. I'm exhausted mentally and physically and emotionally. Well, not much more physically, but mentally and emotionally, because as me and Courtney has talked about more than one time, that we don't get a chance to process it, especially now when all of this is going down. Ahmaud Arbery, we seeing that video, then some of us are finding out about Breonna Taylor, then George Floyd and Tony McDade. Like, we don't have a time to say, okay, now, but like all of this is happening consecutively and back to back. So like we can't, and like we are in the age of social media, and like every time I log on to Facebook, the first thing I see is a video or a picture. Every time I log on to Twitter, I see this and that. Instagram, it's just like, it's never a time to like take a step back and breathe and like really process what is going on right now. And I think it is tiring, like, to be a Black woman and a Black man, Black anybody who falls with it, because like although we've seen it before, it's like now we're truly seeing it because it's being recorded.
Anybody else?
Yeah, there's just no words to describe the emotion, because you go through so many emotions in minutes. It's anger, and then it's grief, and it's a back and forth type of thing. I've been really slow moving and tired, and just exhausted, and it's very fearful. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna wake up and see on TV or on my phone. I never thought I'd live to see the day when there were tanks rolling through my neighborhood. Like, it's just something you can't wrap your mind around. You don't have words to talk about it.
So Courtney, stay with that a little bit, because you're in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And why are tanks rolling down the streets of your neighborhood?
Well, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with the day, but I know a day or two ago, Trump tweeted that he was sending out the National Guard and active duty units. And I live in West Philadelphia. And I saw more police cars coming by, but I was like, okay, there's been protests. That's normal. Like, you expect to see that. And then we were driving down the street a bit to go to the grocery store, and there are tanks, military tanks, 3 and 4 and 5 of them rushing down the street. So my mom swerved to right, and we went back home, and it was just really, really shocking to see. I don't think I've seen one in person before. Like, I've seen it on television. It seems almost like it's not real. And then the thought of danger just being right in front of us was just very, very shocking.
So the military tanks made you feel less safe?
Yeah, they did. I guess the intent is to keep the area safe and so people don't get hurt, but seeing that's not something you see every day. There's grocery stores here, there's daycares, there's schools. People who have been here for generations. I've got neighbors I've known since I was an itty bitty girl, and I just I can't think about a tank, firing into a crowd. or sitting in front of our local grocery store is something I never thought I would see. I really, really did.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to add on to that, I don't, to me, when I see tanks, because like Greenwood, like there's a National Guard like armory here. So like seeing tanks is something like not really surprising to me. Like, but when I see tanks, I don't see it as a model or a thing to keep me safe. I see it as it's a weapon of destruction, a means to be destructive. So like I honestly can't imagine like Greenwood, my small city of Greenwood, to riot and then see tanks, because that means that they're trying to fight against us in a sense.
If I saw a tank running down my street, I would turn back around and go back inside and hope they're not aiming at my house because you're not comfortable. Next, reflection on how you're feeling.
I think I'm just, it's just traumatizing because I feel like as a Black person, it's just so many different things throughout life that you just have to deal with, and it's just in front of you, and you just pretty much just have to deal with it. They just say deal with it, and we don't have a way to deal with it properly. We just have to bottle these things inside, and if we express our rage, if we express the way we're feeling, then we're labeled as angry Black people, or people just think we're lying, or there's not a problem, or there's just. I think about history. And I think about slavery, and I think about the Holocaust, and I think about, the fact that just a few years ago, we really just got the Equal Rights Amendments in the 1960s. That wasn't that long ago. People make it seem like we're just in this post-racial society and everything is all gold and amazing, and it's honestly not like that. We still have these things and these instances of racism going on every day, and it just scares me because history always has its way of repeating itself. And I see that we're supposed to be in a democratic society, and I see people being restricted from expressing their First Amendment protections to freedom of speech and protest, and they're being resistant to that. Just seeing all of these different things, and as a Black man having this fear, like you said, fear that if I go outside, how are you going to be able to distinguish between me and someone who is looting if I am actually protesting for the right reasons? It just how are you going to be able to distinguish between me? They're not going to try and make a distinction. They're going to look at my skin and they're already going to have a label or a target on me because what they assume that I am and what they assume that I'm doing. And it's just like having to live with all the assumptions that the world has already made for us. That's just a lot to have to deal with. To have to be fearful of how you look when you go outside at night, or how you get in your car, or, having, whenever a police pulls you over, really having to sit and put your phone on record and hope that you follow the directions that your parents told you and keep your hands on the steering wheel, all of those things, those conversations that Black people have to have that a lot of people don't know about. Why do we have to be the only ones having those conversations? And why isn't anyone advocating for us to make it better? So it really just hurts, honestly.
So Griffin, do you have a reflection? And one of the things I want to say, Griffin, sometimes it's a tough space for white people when they enter into kind of these lamentations of Black people, but I don't want you to feel that hesitation here, because it's fine, whatever your reflection is.
I think settings like this are so helpful to hear these stories and things you guys are describing, I've never had to feel, I've never experienced. And when I've been pulled over, I don't have that fear. I don't have that sense that you guys have. And I think it's so important for people to hear stories like this to educate and really, there needs to be change. There needs to be a paradigm shift in how people think and how we interact as different races. And I think hearing these stories, it's so impactful. And I think it's really important just to hear this, especially as, white men, and as a white community as a whole, we really need to hear stuff like this so we can, we need to do better. We need to really change and fix our system.
Okay. So I'm gonna segue again, because we kind of occupy our small little corners of the world. And sometimes we wonder, what is it that we can do? But I'm not asking you what you can do. I want to know what Furman can do. Because educational institutions are vitally important in introducing topics and examining topics in society and promoting new ideas and new ways to approach issues that have plagued us through society.
And so what is it that you think Furman can do to help turn the tide, or as Martin Luther King would say, you know, turn the ship of justice? He says the arc of the moral universe is long, but it usually turns towards justice. So we're on this arc. What can Furman do to play a role? And you can take a moment to think. I'm not looking for instantaneous responses. While you're thinking, I have heard ideas floated about maybe we can look at some curricular changes and introducing GERs that that all the students can take on these issues and expose students to these issues. But there are other ways to change, and I've spoken to at least 3 of you a lot independently, and I know you have some ideas about what Furman needs to do, and so let's just kind of chat about them right now.
An idea that I've heard just from speaking with a lot of administration and staff at the university, administration faculty at the university, that I really enjoyed was just the concept of, you know, amending I forgot what they're called. What is it called whenever we go to those, we have like the meetings in person and we have to have 32 of them? CLPs, yes. Amending the CLP protocol, you know, and having just like a requirement that a certain amount of them actually be towards a certain, you know, a topic of diversity or a topic of inclusion or a topic of religious freedom, you know, having, you know, these different sections to just get people not just going to the 30-minute sections that are on something that they're not even going to pay attention to, but finding a way to get students to go to these conversations that they need to be at. You know, maybe if an NAACP, if we're having something and we're having a CLP, say, okay, well, you know, let's make these types of CLPs a requirement, or OLA, or any of these types of Latinx, SDC in general. All of these organizations, we have all these CLPs and we don't have the support of the student body, or we don't have the support of the university. So just having that support would be nice. We would appreciate having that support, so it would feel like what we're doing actually matters there, that we're wanted, and that people want us to be there doing the work that we're doing.
Okay. Anybody else have any ideas?
I'm going to echo exactly what Q said. I think they should be a requirement, maybe definitely not all 32, but a certain amount you need to go to SDC sponsored type of events, because I do think that's what starts dialogue. I also agree with you, Dr. Cosby, that maybe some of those intro classes, specifically for freshmen, should be related around diversity and inclusion. My FYW was about mass incarceration. And that's not something I would have picked ordinarily, but once I took it, I was like, that's really interesting. So, you know, you never know what you could introduce someone to. So I think finding a way to change the curriculum could be a really cool idea.
Great. Anybody else? So if you could have a conversation with some important actors in the world, who do you think would be the people who can effectuate the most change in this area that you would want to talk to? And so while you're thinking, Griffin, it looks like you were about to push the button and then you pulled back.
I know, I think I was just taking notes. But like, I really, really like that idea, Q, of having a requirement of CLPs be SAC events. And I think as the incoming student body president, like, I really want to make sure that, like, let's make that happen. Like, I think that's a great idea. And like, I'm totally, like, we need ideas like this, and let's like start working through them, because like there's, I don't know, that is a great idea. And I'm totally interested in making that happen.
And so then that means we do need the critical actors of faculty and maybe chief diversity officer and Ms. Allen and a lot of people to come together to talk about how we can implement these types of changes in the appropriate administrator in this particular area. The dean getting involved in this discussion. So that would be great for the campus. And I was wondering, when you were thinking about who would you want to talk to who could really effectuate change in this area, I think maybe we should think about the chiefs of our local police stations, our local council members, our mayors, because what a lot of people miss is criminal enforcement and policing are local matters predominantly. They're not federal matters and generally federal questions. Federal incrimination is probably less than 20% of of criminal prosecutions and incarcerations in this country. Most of it are the policies of the communities in which we live. And Courtney, I'm thinking about the fact that Rizzo's statue was taken down in Philadelphia because of his over-policing policies, the 2 terms he served mayor there. And so that's that local action, those local commitments matter, and you get these local actors through voting in local elections. And so I would imagine that might be something you're thinking about. So Q, how much more time do we have?
You can honestly stop it now.
Okay, I just wanted to not close without each of you talking about something that you may have wanted to talk about that I didn't ask about. You good?
I think back to, I was like really just pondering on like what Furman could do. I think there should be a class in each major somehow about diversity and how it affects each like major. I think like especially my mind instantly went to like the pre-med health sciences and stuff like that, and then the business world, like that's a whole nother playing field, because like we can, like I know for a fact between my major and politics and international affairs department, race is a constant factor in it, and philosophy. So like in history, of course, but I think like the other majors that we wouldn't generally see these type of classes, like introduce these types of classes into it and like make it play a factor in their education, because this is a real life situations happens around diversity and race and it's ethnicities and whatnot.
I mean, I think your ideas are excellent ideas, and I'm glad that they're recorded because we're going to post this video for the university community to see. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending, and thank you for putting this together and everyone's statement and reflections. I think this was a very good exchange of ideas and emotions and action planning.
Thank you, Professor Cosby. Thank you all for joining us. I just want to say that. All right.